We have lots to discuss in today's video, including an article that we're going to review that suggests the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs will make good trade partners. We'll discuss that deal, which involves 3 NHL players and multiple picks, and I'll give you my thoughts and analysis on that trade. Plus, could the Oilers reunite with a former goaltender with an attempt to strengthen that part of the team's depth? Plus, we have some other updates around the league. Could Jani Hakanpaa make his return to the NHL next season? Marc-Edouard Vlasic apparently was blindsided by his buyout from the Sharks and is still looking for an opportunity to play. Plus, were the Red Wings trying to make a big splash in free agency but didn't get the opportunity, in the Blackhawks unfortunately facing another lawsuit? All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. We'll get to some of the trade discussions here in a few minutes, but first we have a bunch of other quick NHL news stories I want to take a quick look at. A couple of updates, including Jani Hakanpaa. Of course, we know last year ended up getting signed by the Toronto Maple Leafs, was a bit of an unknown, if you will, on what he was going to be able to do for the Leafs. Spent the bulk of the year on injured reserve, did end up playing a little bit, but then really didn't. Ultimately, you could say didn't really end up playing that big of a role for the team. But Hakanpaa did recently complete an interview with a Finnish news outlet, and he says that he's fully cleared and fully healthy at this point, and that he's been in contact with some NHL teams for potential work for next season. He says that he was actually given clearance during the Stanley Cup playoffs this past spring, and had the Leafs called on him to play during the playoffs, he would have been available to do so. He says multiple teams have shown interest in his services, but he's at this point decided to kind of wait things out and see how some of these teams kind of, how their blue line kind of shakes out, if you will, to see where he feels has kind of got the best opportunity. It's not really clear based on his comments if he's, thinking he's confident he's going to actually get signed and get a contract, or he'll have to go on a professional tryout. That part wasn't really clear, but the good news is for Hakanpaa that he's feeling much better. He's got clearance, but we do know that the knee issues that he's had has been, over a few years, has been a problem. Even though he's cleared now, is he going to run into future issues? I still think he's a player that comes with a lot of risk. He's 6'7". He's a right shot defenseman. He can play very physical style. If he's able to play and be anywhere near the best version of himself, he could very well be a under the radar, kind of low risk, high reward type of pickup for a team. However, based on what we've seen more recently, I just think the odds of that happening are probably slim, but you just don't know. I mean, could he get a PTO? That's definitely low risk for sure. At most, would he get a 1-year league minimum contract? Maybe. I mean, we saw the Red Wings sign Travis Hamonic yesterday, so I would say anything is possible. You just never know. But the 6'7" Hakanpaa is apparently cleared, ready to play, and has interest. So he says we will see if something materializes for him to get back into NHL action next season. Now, as I mentioned as well, another veteran NHL player looking to continue his NHL career, as well as former longtime San Jose Shark Marc-Edouard Vlasic. Vlasic ended up getting bought out this past summer, who still had a year left on his contract with the Sharks. He was expected to go back and play in what would have been his 20th NHL season. He did complete an interview here recently and kind of suggested he wasn't really thrilled with how things went down. Based on his comments, he kind of sounds like, in a way, he's happy now, but wasn't really crazy with how things appeared to go down. Says during his exit meetings with the San Jose Sharks, there really wasn't any mention that this was a possibility. He said the feedback he got was mostly positive, and that one of the things that they did give him positive feedback on was his ability to be a good mentor for a lot of their younger up-and-coming defensemen, and that they were hoping he could continue with that for next season. So when he got the buyout notice later into June, it was kind of a shock and something he didn't see coming. So certainly, I don't think he was overly thrilled with the communication from the Sharks management, and kind of would have appreciated just a little bit being a little bit more upfront, when the season ended there. But it's certainly understandable for sure. But he also goes on to say as well that he feels like he hasn't reached the end of his career, that he still has more to give, and he feels the Sharks know that as well. Says he's motivated to train and find a new team and put it in the face of the Sharks. So he's looking for not only an opportunity to play, but an opportunity to prove that San Jose was wrong and made a bad decision to buy out the longtime veteran defenseman who played a huge role for them for many years. And really, he was the last holdover from when they were a much more competitive team, back when they were consistently in the playoffs and contending and never won a Stanley Cup. But they did get close, and they did have some, a number of playoff series wins, and obviously have a fair bit of success that way. When they had, Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, Joe Pavelski, Burns was more of a prominent Shark back then, and Logan Couture. They had some really good players and some really good teams. And Vlasic, for a long stretch, was widely considered one of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL. But in more recent years, he's kind of been viewed upon as something very different than that. So as much as Vlasic still feels he has more to give, wants to hit his 20th NHL season, doesn't think it's the end, wants to continue to prove that he can still play, I don't know. To be honest, being the fact that he's been in San Jose, I will say that I don't get to watch as much West Coast hockey. I'm on the East Coast as east as you can get, as far as time zones go, at least in Atlantic Canada. So, watching games that start on the West Coast, quite often it's like 11 o'clock or later at night here. So, I do stay up and watch a fair bit of California-based games especially, but it's challenging. So I don't get to see teams like the Sharks and the Ducks and the Kings quite as much as I like. Now, when they're on East Coast swings, I do get to watch all of those games a lot easier. But, instead of, there's some teams I get to watch all 82 games or big chunks of them. But some of those West Coast teams, I probably do well to maybe see, 20 or 30. But I, obviously always watch the highlights, always watch as much and take in as much action as is humanly possible. But to watch every single game, it's just not physically possible, especially when you have such a time zone difference. But with that being said, I've seen enough of Vlasic to know that he hasn't been that great of a defenseman in the last couple of years, especially. He's been in the rumor mill for being a buyout candidate for at least 2 years before this one. So, was I surprised he got bought out? No. In a way, maybe a little bit, just because San Jose did not need the cap space. They don't really need the roster spot either. So, I think they could have let it ride out. I don't know. But, yeah, it was ultimately interesting. The other thing he said as well was that, we know he started the season with an injury and missed the first chunk of the year. He said he was ready to return in November, and they held him out until January. So that was a little bit confusing. He says his agent is currently kind of canvassing for opportunities, and he's basically willing to play anywhere. He rattled off a bunch of teams and just said, if anybody wants to sign me, I'm game to go wherever. I just want to continue playing and want to prove that I can still play. So certainly fair to say Vlasic did not take kindly to the buyout, did not take kindly to how things went down, and is eager to prove them wrong. Now, he also went on to say as well that he was now, after everything that's happened, that he's happy now in that, he wasn't, I guess, the craziest about going back there for another season. I don't know that he was thrilled with his role and how he was being utilized and all of that, but obviously would have fulfilled the contract should this not have transpired. So Marc-Andre Vlasic is a free agent, obviously as of this point in August, unsigned, but given his long-term veteran status, would I be surprised if he at the very least gets a PTO? No, I wouldn't. I'm not sure where he's going to end up, if anywheres, but yeah, he's up there in years. Hasn't played great for the last number of years. So he thinks there's game left. It's hard to see it, but I wish him the best and hope for his sake, just as from a personal standpoint, that he finds a team and has an opportunity at least to prove his old team wrong. Another story that popped up here as well, the Chicago Blackhawks are unfortunately facing yet another lawsuit. Now, this one is very different than the couple that we've seen before, of course, with the big one being the Kyle Beach incident that happened. We've seen there was another allegation of abuse that came after that. This one is different. Now, this one is somebody who worked in public relations for the Chicago Blackhawks, and they are suing for discrimination and wrongful termination. Now, this person alleges that they were treated differently because of the fact that they were gay, and they also are alleging that they were terminated basically shortly after completing an interview for a website called Outsports, which is a website that covers LGBTQ issues in sports. So basically, it seems like as soon as the interview was published, it claims he was criticized internally within his supervisor within his office there. They weren't thrilled with how things went, is what he says. And then within a very short time, within a day or so, he was terminated for cause. And his supervisor even had approval from the highest up, Danny Wirtz. Now, the team responded to the claims and says that they had multiple written communications in his HR file, including a formal and final written warning for not following or for disregarding, I guess is the word they use, company policies. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what's going to come from this. The fact that the Blackhawks are facing another lawsuit doesn't probably do a lot of help, to kind of, I guess, improve people's perceptions of how the organization is run. But at the same time, until this kind of has a chance to go through the legal proceedings, it's really difficult to say how the outcome is going to go. Both based on what I read on this lawsuit, definitely fair to say both sides have a completely different story as to what happened here. And I guess time will tell. We'll see what happens. But like I said, completely different scenario than what we've seen in the past with lawsuits alleging, not great things going on in Chicago. But if this is true, obviously not great things either. But we'll have to wait and see how things go through the court process. Or will there be another court settlement? Will it reach trial? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, another quick piece of information that came across today was James Myrtle of The Athletic talking about the Detroit Red Wings and how they were prepared to make a big offer to a pending UFA defenseman that they were really hoping they could add to their roster. Now, we've seen the big addition of Travis Hamonic yesterday, and I say that jokingly here because, yes, I really reamed the Red Wings for their Hamonic signing. I know it's short term. I know it's not a lot of money, but to me, it's still wasted money, wasted space. This is a team that hasn't done a lot to really get better after missing the playoffs again. And now you've got multiple defensemen who, in my opinion, are not NHL caliber defensemen. This was the weakest point of their team last year. They had a variety of things that need to improve on, to be honest, within their whole team structure there. But I think the decor is definitely the biggest part of it, in my opinion. And they're coming back with largely the same team. I mean, you've got, a couple of former guys who battled out for third pair options with Ottawa, with JBD and now Hamonic. I mean, I don't get it. And you throw in Justin Hall, and it's like, geez, depending on the day, if they have to play all three of these guys at one time, that's going to be a pretty rough looking lineup. Thankfully, Mo Sider's there and will play a lot of minutes. But yeah, I mean, the Red Wings blue line, it leaves a lot to be desired, in my opinion. But according to James Myrtle, they were really hoping to be big players for Aaron Ekblad. And they had a big offer planned for Ekblad should he become an unrestricted free agent and have an opportunity to leave the Florida Panthers. Ultimately, that didn't happen. He, along with Brad Marchand and Sam Bennett, all re-signed him to Panthers. They kept everyone. They found a way to do it. Obviously, they all kind of took a little less. They were creative with the term and a bunch of things that we saw happen in Florida. I don't know exactly what the offer was going to be, but Myrtle made mention that it definitely would have put a fair bit more money in his pocket, and it would have been considered a much more lucrative offer than what he ended up taking to stay with the Panthers. But obviously, a big blow for Detroit. A lot of, free agency wasn't quite as exciting this year, and much as there was potential for a bunch of names, a lot of them didn't end up hitting the market after all. So, yeah, I mean, that kind of sucks for them. But Detroit and Yzerman have certainly not done a lot for their own case outside of that. So, to me, Yzerman needs to get some work to be done. Now, on the trade front, we're going to look at an article here in a minute regarding a Montreal-Toronto trade, which is just a trade proposal from a writer from Heavy.com. And also came across the article looking at Oilers' goaltending options and wondering about former Oilers goalie Laurent Brossoit. Of course, currently with the Blackhawks, and we know they have Spencer Knight and Arvid Soderblom. Of course, Brossoit missed the entire season last year with a knee injury. So, could he be an option for them? I mean, he's only signed for one more year. He's been a starter. He's been a really good backup. He's been an injured guy a lot too, which is risky. But the Blackhawks definitely, to me, have more than they need in goaltenders. They're going to end up putting a guy like Brossoit probably on waivers if they don't trade him. I just think he's a guy that could be moved for a cheap trade price. And the Oilers are, they're familiar with this guy from quite a long time ago, mind you, but still, he's been good. Would he be considered an upgrade to kind of push Stuart Skinner? I mean, we've seen as well in the Carey Price trade speculation that we talked about here in the last couple of days. Wondering, too, if Montreal, because Chicago is one of the rumored teams that Price's contract could go to, wondering if Montreal might look for a veteran coming back just to take the pressure off Dobush and run with a more veteran tandem in Montembeault and Brossoit if they were to do that, and still have Dobush as the number 3. It would only probably be just for this year, giving Dobush more chance to develop. You get Jacob Fowler down there having hopefully another strong development year as well. And then you can kind of reevaluate throughout the year. If Brossoit does have any injury issues, you've already got comfort level built up and confidence with Dobush based on what he did last year. It does make some sense. But ultimately, if Brossoit is moved, wondering where Montreal probably is less likely, could Edmonton be an option? So we'll see where things go on that front. Now, the Heavy.com article suggests that longtime rivals of the original 6 teams, Montreal and Toronto, they feel they make good trade partners. And I'll explain the deal to you here, and I'll let you know what I think, and I'd like to know what you think as well down in the comments. So the trade suggests Montreal move Kirby Dach. Now, we know Dach is unlikely to be ready to start the season. Obviously still recovering from a second ACL injury, and certainly has some question marks over his future until he can get back and play and show he can be healthy and consistent and all that. There's definitely some risk and some question marks around this player. There's no doubt. However, this article suggests trading him to Toronto, who we do know has rumored to be looking for another center, but we also know Montreal is looking for another center as well. So to move a center and not get one back maybe doesn't make the most sense. So this article suggests Dach to the Leafs for Nick Robertson, Bobby McMahon, and a couple of draft picks. And the draft picks are both like late rounders. I think one was a 6th, one was a 7th. So basically, we'll say Dach for McMahon and Robertson. I mean, from a money perspective, they get 2 wingers going to Montreal that are not making a ton of money, but could both be 15, 20 goal guys. So is that an overpayment for Dach? I mean, what is Dach's value at right now? To get 2 players that can play and then 2 late draft picks? I don't know that Toronto would want to give up that much. Would Toronto want Dach? I don't know. And would Montreal and Toronto want to do this deal? I'm not really convinced they would. Now, in Montreal's perspective, though, no disrespect to McMahon or Robertson, I think if their roster was different, maybe they would make more sense, and maybe that would be a deal that could realistically happen. But Montreal's already pretty good on the wings. I mean, they've got Cole Caulfield and Juraj Slafkovsky, who normally was on the first line last year. You've got Patrick Laine and Ivan Demidov, who they're expecting to be second-line wingers this year. You've got Brendan Gallagher and Josh Anderson, who they, I believe, will want as their third line. And they've got some different options for the fourth line. But you've also got Boldu, right, who you picked up from St. Louis for the Mailloux trade. So, you've already got basically 6 wingers, and I haven't even mentioned Zach Boldu yet, right? So, in that case, does Anderson or Gallagher move down to the fourth line, and you get him probably on the third? They're pretty good on the wings, is the summary here. So, to add Robertson and McMahon, I just don't know where they'd put them. without moving another winger or two themselves. So from that perspective, the deal doesn't make the most sense. We know that, like I said, Toronto would like a center, I think ideally, to play in that middle part of their lineup. I think they like to have an option of having Tavares on the wing. And Montreal, we know, needs a number 2 center as well. And I can understand why Montreal might not be the most confident in Doc. And if they could bring back somebody else that can really solidify that spot, I can see them doing it. But neither of these guys that proposed in this trade are a centerman. So I don't really think, I mean, if you just look at what each player is capable of and what's being offered, okay, it's not a terrible trade in that sense. And Doc to the Toronto Maple Leafs makes some sense. But to lose 2 younger wingers for him when you really want to move David Kampf, Kelly Yarncroke, and you haven't done so, and they're not included here either, then you're not moving the right depth players. So I don't really like this trade really for either side. I don't mind Toronto getting Doc. That's about the only part of this that I kind of like. But I don't like Montreal getting these wingers. Like I said, it's not that they're not decent players, and it's an okay return. But they have lots of wingers, so they're going to have an overabundance of them, and they're going to be forced to either flip or these guys or trade somebody else, something, right? So I just don't know how that makes the most sense, and it doesn't solve Montreal's number 2 center spot. If you're going to trade a guy like Doc, you ideally want to try to solve that spot. In Toronto's perspective, okay, if you got to move a couple of wingers, but you haven't moved Yarncroke, you haven't moved Kampf yet. I don't think they really want to move McMahon. I mean, I guess if you look at the breakdown of their team, and especially with, maybe a guy like Easton Cowan having a shot, maybe to crack the lineup, you could make an argument that maybe McMahon or Robertson could be expendable. And it's not even so much that they're not. It's just, I don't mind this trade from Toronto's perspective. I just don't think Montreal would ever do it. And I'm not sure that Doc is the perfect player for Toronto. That's why I'm kind of like, not really sure I like it for either side. If I had to pick a side that I thought would do better here, it would be Toronto, just because Doc makes, I can see where he could play with them, whereas on Montreal side, these 2 guys, they're good players, but where are you going to put them? Unless there's another follow-up trade to move a couple of other wingers out of Montreal, it just doesn't make sense, and we don't know what or how that would work. So that's the article I came across. Thought it was interesting. Want to see what everybody thought of it. I don't think it happens. I don't think it really makes enough sense to pursue. But let me know what you think down in the comments below, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.